die, who is gonna become the dragon warrior to save all of China? Yeah, now you see how important pandas are. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that studies martial arts footage in super slow motion to make sure that everyone is, in fact, kung fu fighting, rather than, like, you know, judo fighting or capoeira fighting or Krav Maga fighting. Dear viewer, if you've been on the cinematic journey that I call Film Theory for more than a few episodes, you already know my would-be creepy if it weren't my job-level obsession with kids' movies. But now, it's even less creepy because I've got myself a toddler, and I can spend quality time with my son watching something that we can both enjoy, while bonus, still get my work done on the side. Multitasking for the win. Our most recent father-son feature, Kung Fu Panda. My son loved the movie, but as any of you who've ever been around a toddler know, little kids are proto-theorists who ask a lot of questions. Luckily, his questions so far have been pretty simple. What's that? Panda. What's he doing? Kung Fu. Boom. Nailed it. But as he gets older, those questions are going to start to get more sophisticated. How is the panda such a good fighter? Why did Oogway choose Po to be the dragon warrior to save the valley in the first place as opposed to literally anyone else? Why do all the animals have themselves creepy human teeth? Reasonable questions all, future version of my son. And while I can't answer the third one, today I do want to cover the first two. Why is Po, of all the animals, the dragon warrior? What makes Po so special? You ever notice that it never really gets that solid of an explanation in the movie? In a fictional world where there's already plenty of other highly skilled and trained warriors, what makes this random panda the chosen one? Oh, there's a reason. And that reason is getting this thing in the Chinese theater so it can make boatloads of cash in what's become the most important theatrical market in the world. But the cynical realities of filmmaking aside, I do believe that there is also a reason in universe for why Po is the perfect candidate above and beyond everyone else, and it's not what you'd expect. So shove as many dumplings in your mouth as you can and arrest those comet fingers of fury. We're jump kicking into the world of Kung Fu Panda. Skadoosh. When Master Oogway determines that Po is in fact the dragon warrior, a mythical hero he was told would one day save the valley and gain limitless power, most of the other characters were skeptical that Po could possibly be a great warrior for one main reason: his body type. They're not exactly subtle about it either.
Look at you, this
Now, this kind of stuff was probably my least favorite part of Kung Fu Panda because it's perpetuating some negative stereotypes about bodies that just flat out aren't true. The idea that you have to have yourself six-pack abs in order to be a good athlete or a good fighter isn't just bias, it's actually scientifically inaccurate. And no, I'm not just talking about sumo wrestlers here. For instance, in 2019, the heavyweight boxing champion of the world was this guy, Anthony Joshua, and he faced off against this guy, Andy Ruiz Jr. Anthony Joshua looks like what we've been conditioned to think that an elite athlete should look like, and Andy Ruiz doesn't. But since I'm bringing this up, you probably know how the story's gonna end. Ruiz knocked Joshua down 4 times throughout the fight, ultimately winning by TKO. That's technical knockout for those of you who've never played Punch-Out before. Sure, they had themselves a rematch that Anthony Joshua won by decision, but Andy Ruiz has 33 wins in the ring and only 2 defeats as a professional boxer, so it's not like he's some nobody who just threw one lucky punch. Sports nutritionist Dr. Mayer Renchortis said after the fight that Ruiz's additional mass was actually working to his advantage, and that's simple physics. Since force is mass times acceleration, more mass behind the punch means a stronger punch. Ruiz is also not the only elite fighter with this sort of body type. This is Daniel Cormier, one of only a handful of mixed martial artists ever to hold the championship in multiple different weight classes. Serena Williams has faced all sorts of criticisms about her body, mainly that she's too muscular to play tennis, which, let's be real, you're too muscular to be an athlete is probably one of the dumbest of dumb takes, but go figure, she's almost undoubtedly the greatest women's tennis player in history. We could do this all day. The point is that looking at someone's body shape tells you nothing about their physical skill, their flexibility, strength, speed, balance, or any other attribute that actually matters in athletic performance. Can Po be the dragon warrior despite not having washboard abs and giant biceps? Of course he can. And in terms of how much strength he can put behind his strikes, his weight may actually be acting as an advantage. There's also an argument to be made that Poe's body type makes him a better warrior not just because he can inflict more damage, but also because he can absorb more damage. Apparently, pandas fall out of trees all the time, and according to zookeepers, don't usually get injured as much as they get embarrassed. Just when I thought pandas couldn't get any more relatable. Anyway, science suggests that their added body fat might be helping them avoid injury when this happens. A 2003 study found that higher levels of subcutaneous fat, quote, was associated with significantly decreased injury for people in car accidents. A study from Leeds Beckett University also demonstrated that overweight individuals had a higher pressure pain tolerance than those whose body mass indexes were in the normal range. And this isn't just me randomly applying real-world science to a fictional movie. We see it actively play out in the films. In Kung Fu Panda 2, Ho takes a blast from Lord Shen's cannon at nearly point-blank range, and he manages to survive it because it hits him in his more cushioned midsection. And in the original Kung Fu Panda, the Snow Leopard Tai Lung's special attack looks like it affects his opponent's nerves as he uses it to paralyze the Furious Five. But Ho is immune to that attack in his final battle, and instead of being paralyzed by it, he just gets tickled. Given Mantis's difficulty finding Poe's pressure points earlier in the movie due to his rotund physique, it appears that carrying a few more LBSs is Poe's secret offensive and defensive weapon. But Pat, aren't pandas super low energy and lazy? Doesn't that make Poe a terrible fighter? Yes, the letter to the editor that we seem to get every episode. It's true that normal pandas have low metabolic rates and are seen as relatively slow-moving and lazy, but Poe isn't a normal panda. See, the main reason that pandas have such slow metabolisms is that their diets are horribly inefficient. Pandas have short digestive tracts, which is perfect for eating meat, but instead they spend 10 plus hours per day eating bamboo to get their nutritional needs. And then, because they can't digest it all that well, they have to poop about 40 times a day. Heard that right, 40 batches of panda pellets per day. Charmin really should have been using pandas on all those ad campaigns. But on a more chemical level, it means that pandas have extremely low levels of the hormone tyrosine, which regulates thyroid function and things like energy usage. But you'll notice that Poe's diet isn't bamboo. It's, well, everything else, especially dumplings and bean buns and tofu, all the things that Mr. King serves. And wouldn't you know it, meat, soybeans, and other legumes are all the foods that are highest in tyrosine. So it's likely that Poe is eating a diet that both will make him much more energetic than the normal panda, while also saving him time on chewing wood and clogging his septic tank. Maybe that diet is just what we needed to turn an ordinary panda into a martial arts master. So that's all well and good. Poe's body type is actually helping him attack with more force and cushion blows more easily. His special diet is making him more energetic than your average panda. But still, why didn't Oogway just choose one of the Furious Five as a dragon warrior? I mean, this one has always bugged me since, you know, they were all seasoned kung fu experts to begin with, and Poe was not. So I did some digging and realized that, well, yes, they all knew kung fu, they didn't know the right kind of kung fu. See, calling kung fu only one thing is like saying basketball and water polo are the same sport because in both you're trying to throw a ball into a net. There are a ton of different styles of kung fu, including the Shaolin animal styles. What are 5 of the most common animal styles, provided you're not including In-N-Out's secret menu? I bet you can guess. Tiger, monkey, crane, snake, and mantis, just like we see in the movie. Bet you were wondering why there was a random mantis as part of the team, huh? Well, now you know. It's a dedicated style of kung fu. Each of these styles is used by its corresponding member of the Furious Five, but none of them in particular use another common animal style, the dragon style. Now, there's no such thing as panda style in the real world, but Poe actually has some instincts that would help him utilize that dragon style most effectively. One of the defining elements of dragon style kung fu is the dragon step, which moves in this unconventional zigzag kind of dance. And before Poe receives any training, his instinct is to use, as he calls them, his crazy feet. And given that the dragon style is in many ways a mashup of techniques from all the other animal styles, Poe is in a great position to learn it because we know he's been a super fan of the Furious Five since the beginning. He's been studying / practicing their techniques in his bedroom since day one. It's one of the first things that we know about him. Each member of the Furious Five can have their own specialization, and by learning from all of them, Poe is laying the groundwork to become the Dragon Warrior Master without ever realizing it. In fact, Oogway kind of tells us this at the end of Kung Fu Panda 3, that his vision for the Dragon Warrior was someone who could serve as a sort of connecting point.
On the first day we met, I saw the future of Kung Fu and the past. I saw the panda who could unite them both. That is why I chose you, Poe. Both sides of the yin and beyond.
Oogway already knew from his own experience that pandas had the ability to master Qi, the spiritual elements of Kung Fu, but his mention of yin and yang here is relevant. Even though Oogway's first impression of Po is that he's a buffoon who just crash-landed in front of him, he sees the opposing side that is Po's potential. That's why when Oogway laid eyes on what appeared to be a clumsy, unassuming panda, he knew that inside was also a graceful and powerful dragon. Unless when Oogway says that he saw both sides of the yin and yang, he means Po was black and white. His fur made him literally look like a yin-yang sign. Not the whole body shape thing and mastering different styles, and nah, that's definitely not that thing. It was clearly the body shape and the diet and his super fandom of the Furious Five that made him the perfect dragon warrior. Oh, and also the whole make money in China thing. That one's actually probably the most important. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory.
This may be the world you want, the world you envision, but because of your mistakes, your missteps, this is the world you will get. And the only way to stop it, to save it, never listen to this turtle. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, the show that knows that the secret to theorizing was inside of you all along. And just to start, I'm sure many of you are probably a little bit confused right now. Why did MatPat's voice suddenly drop a couple of octaves? Is this a true crime podcast now? Well, not exactly. Obviously, I am not MatPat. My name is Lee. It's great to meet you. I own 4 swords, and I've lost a game of Mario Party to Vegeta. Well, his voice actor. He's a nice guy. I've actually been working behind the scenes here on the Theorist channels for going on 10 years now. No joke, I was the 3rd editor Matt ever hired all the way back in like August of 2014. My very first episode was The Peach is Dead game theory, but I've since been able to keyframe my way out of the editor dungeon, and I've had a hand in film theory since the very beginning. I've written or edited countless videos for the channels. Like literally, I tried to count them and I have no idea. They all kind of just blur together at some point. Like, I think I did Gaster. Not Sans' Nest though, that was all Matt. Regardless, I know this is a big change, and I know it's a lot. But this meme that's been floating around really kind of sums it up best.
My time has come. You must continue your journey without me.
What are you... What?
But something else that this meme reminded me of, the fact that Kung Fu Panda 4 is right about to hit theaters as of the time of writing. And now that I've taken up the mantle of the film theorist, I can't wait to watch it. In case you don't know, Kung Fu Panda is about Po, a panda obsessed with Kung Fu and the martial arts masters that live in his village. Master Oogway the tortoise, the Furious Five, and Master Shifu, who is apparently a red panda. Despite not having any traditional Kung Fu training, Po is named the Dragon Warrior that will gain limitless power, much to the confusion and frustration of all the other masters. By the end, Po and the others learn that the limitless power is not some magical technique or hidden energy. It's the realization that you were special just the way you are. I was practically raised with these sorts of animated homages to martial arts like Jackie Chan Adventures and Shaolin Showdown, so I really connected with the Kung Fu Panda films. The wholesome message of loving yourself in 1, the heartfelt themes of family in 2, the killer animation in 3, and that's not even mentioning the multiple spin-off series and web shows and even a holiday special. But the thing I respected the most, the restraint of not using the song Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting until the 3rd movie. That is true power. But of course, when you consume that much content as a theorist, you're bound to notice some inconsistencies, specifically when it comes to everyone's favorite old kind of Kung Fu tortoise, Master Oogway. See, between the hours of meditation and giving out cryptic advice, like
Quit, don't quit.
he's creating more problems than he's solving. He is not the wise master that this series has made him out to be. In fact, he fails pretty much everyone he has ever taught, leaving his students in a worse place than where they started. And the most disgraceful part of it, his flaws have created cycles of abuse and miscommunication that threaten to go on and on unless someone steps up to stop it. Look within yourself and cook your noodles, loyal theorists. It's time for some Kung Fu fighting. Skadoosh! So how in the world am I going to make the argument that adorable old Master Oogway is actually the absolute worst? Well, it comes down to what I have identified as his 3 major flaws: his lies, his teaching, and his legacy. Let's start with Oogway's first major flaw, his lies. The entire conflict of the first movie is built completely on Oogway's lies about the Dragon Warrior. See, the Dragon Warrior is a prodigy of Kung Fu who would be worthy to learn the secret held within the Dragon Scroll. When they open the scroll, the Dragon Warrior will be granted limitless power, something they love to bring up in the first movie.
You think it's that easy? That I'm just going to hand you the secret
to limitless power.
The scroll has given him power!
The prophecy was first foretold by Master Oogway, who said that the Dragon Warrior would protect both the Valley of Peace and its inhabitants.
It is now, what hope you have brought peace to this valley.
But at the climax of the first movie, we learn that the legend of the Dragon Warrior is a sham. After Poe finally opens the scroll, he finds only a blank, shiny canvas, though he later sees himself in the scroll's reflection, realizing that
There is no secret ingredient.
the secret power of the Dragon Warrior was just to believe in yourself. Classic, the power was inside of you all along, sort of stuff. Regardless, the legend of the Dragon Warrior was never true, and all of it was something that Oogway made up to encourage others to train in Kung Fu, to get better, and to protect the Valley of Peace. Basically, it was kind of a deterrent. If you're a bad guy, you wouldn't want to attack the Valley of Peace because it may cause the legendary Dragon Warrior to rise up and defeat you. But therein lies the problem. The prophecy doesn't do that. In fact, it does the opposite, creating more havoc for the Valley of Peace than it prevents. The villain of the first film, Tai Lung, was once a student of Shifu and Oogway who showed a natural talent in Kung Fu, enough so that Shifu considered him a serious candidate for Dragon Warrior. Tai Lung spent his whole life training, Shifu filling his head with stories that he was going to fulfill the prophecy. And because of this, Tai Lung pushed himself, hard enough to the point of physical injury.
Who filled my head with dreams? Who willed me to train until my bones cracked?
And yet, as Tai Lung was about to be given the title of Dragon Warrior, shown that the secret of the power was just believing in himself, he was denied at the last hurdle. And why? Because Master Oogway got some bad vibes from him.
Oogway saw darkness in his heart and refused.
This ends up pushing Tai Lung over the edge, as he goes on a rampage that terrorizes the Valley of Peace. Oogway's creation of the legend of the Dragon Warrior, this goal dangled before Tai Lung that he worked his entire life for, and that was never given to him with no explanation as to why, was the core reason why Tai Lung did his top 10 anime betrayal. If Oogway had never lied, or explained to Tai Lung the truth about the Dragon Warrior instead of just walking away disappointed, Tai Lung probably would have been a pretty chill dude, a dedicated master of Kung Fu raised in the Valley of Peace, and potentially part of the Furious Five. But Tai Lung's fall from grace isn't the only preventable conflict created by Oogway's lie about the Dragon Warrior. In the video game adaptation of Kung Fu Panda 2, a Komodo dragon named Zhao Dan challenges Poe because he wants to prove that the Dragon Warrior is not strong enough to stop him.
Gongmen City should belong to the strong, the cunning, the ruthless, someone like...
And the Legends of Awesomeness TV series has a ton of villains who have a bone to pick with the Dragon Warrior. Kim the Invincible, obsessed with battling the strongest fighters in the world, travels to China because he wants to defeat the fabled Dragon Warrior. Hoon-Dun, a former guard of Tai Lung's prison, blames the Dragon Warrior for all of his troubles and learns Kung Fu specifically so he can destroy him. Quan the Unkillable tries to kill Poe partially because he wants to defeat the Dragon Warrior and regain his fame. Even the Emperor's advisor uses Poe's title as the Dragon Warrior in an attempted plot to take the throne for himself. I could go on and on, but you get the point. Rather than the Dragon Warrior deterring the bad guys, so many villains in this world only see Poe as an obstacle, someone to outsmart, overpower, or defeat. If Master Oogway's long-term goal was to get people to learn Kung Fu, congratulations, it worked. But at what cost? The creation of how many villains? And as a result of it all, time and time again, danger is brought to the Valley of Peace. But that's hardly the worst thing that this tortoise has done. Oogway's second major flaw? His teaching. Master Oogway is just not as good of a teacher as this series makes him out to be, and his lessons actually hurt more people than they help. We've already talked at length about Tai Lung and Oogway's refusal to step in and take a guiding hand there, but it goes so much further, especially in the Legends of Awesomeness TV series. Similar to Tai Lung, another former student of the Jade Palace that went bad was Fang Wang. She was personally trained by Master Oogway, but as she became more powerful, she challenged Oogway for control of the Jade Palace. In the show, it's framed as if Fang Wang had darkness in her heart, similar to Tai Lung. But just listen to exactly how what Fang Wang did was described.
Trained her, she just got it. And that's when she started to change. She challenged me to fight.
declaring that she would be the master of the Jade Palace.
That's it. No, she tried to murder all the students. No, she tried to enslave the valley. No, I'm going to kill you specifically, Oogway. All she did was challenge Oogway for mastery of the Jade Palace in a fair fight. And what did Oogway do in response? Instead of doing nothing like he did with Tai Lung, Oogway did something even worse. He created an owl-shaped cage that was inescapable, perfectly fit for Fang Wang. Even if it's all true and Fang Wang did start turning evil, which again, I'm not so sure of, all this means is that Oogway didn't even try talking to her. Instead, he saw the dark path that she started down and just decided that imprisoning her in an Iron Maiden was the best course of action. Exactly like we saw with Tai Lung. For those of you keeping count at home, that is now 2 times where Oogway has seen someone going down a dark path and done nothing about it. In other cases, where there is definitely some innate evil in some of his students, Oogway takes no action before they hurt other people. Case in point, Ding was a Kung Fu student at the Jade Palace who had incredible telekinetic abilities. To his credit, Oogway recognized this talent, but instead of taking Ding under his wing, Oogway sent him away to an order of monks to train. This led to tragedy when Ding grew impatient, using his abilities to hypnotize the monks and forcing them to jump to their deaths. There is just so much wrong with this. Like, if Oogway is so adept at sensing the darkness in people's hearts that he was willing to prepare a cage to lock up one of the Furious Five, his most trusted students, why didn't he sense Ding's darkness and put a stop to it before he murdered all of those innocent monks? But these sorts of special talents aren't always recognized. For example, there's Dao Dai, one of the series' recurring antagonists who helped Shifu construct the training hall of the Jade Palace. He also became one of Oogway and Shifu's students, though he had a lot of trouble learning martial arts. But Dao Dai had other skills, putting his talents in engineering to good use before constructing a giant wooden warrior that would fight for him.
I wanted to make up for my lackings, so I devised ingenious mechanical contrivances to compensate for my weak spots.
Honestly, that's really cool, and something that should be celebrated. I mean, Kung Fu Panda is a franchise all about embracing who you are instead of trying to be someone else. So shouldn't this sort of inventiveness be held up? Not if you're Oogway. According to Dao Dai, Oogway felt that.
Purity of Kung Fu.
Way to gatekeep there, my guy. Time after time, in so many ways, Oogway's teachings fail many of his students, making villains out of them when they didn't need to be. The only thing worse than that, what happens to his successful students. Oogway's third major flaw, his legacy. Oogway has passed down his prejudice for those that he's deemed unacceptable, and even the students that did live up to Oogway's expectations all inherit his worst traits. For example, let's start with Shifu. Just think about how Shifu treats Tai Lung after Oogway denounces him. Keep in mind, Shifu found Tai Lung as an infant and adopted him, raising him as a son. Tai Lung looked to Shifu for approval like a father.
I did to make you proud! Tell me how proud you are!
But what does Shifu do when Oogway refuses to name Tai Lung the Dragon Warrior? Just shaking his head and walking away. Instead of comforting his son, talking to him, and encouraging him to keep at it, or going to Oogway and asking for an explanation, Shifu does nothing. This ends up taking a huge emotional toll on both Tai Lung and Shifu, destroying their relationship, and also turns Shifu into a hardened and cold mentor instead of the father figure he was before Oogway's influence.
Shifu loved Tai Lung like he had never loved anyone before.
Look at that face! Tigress, at this point a child, clearly needs support and approval. Shifu cannot give it because of Oogway's actions. Just like his own master, Shifu has become a bad teacher. But even without taking into account this moment that must have been emotionally devastating for Shifu, there are situations where we see Shifu carry on the worst of Oogway's teachings. For example, we can look at the reaction when Oogway names Po as the Dragon Warrior.
No. If the panda has not quit by morning, then I will have failed you.
You don't belong in the Jade Palace. You're a disgrace to Kung Fu, and if you have any respect for who we are, you will be gone by morning.
Instead of respecting the choice, Shifu and the rest are rude to Po. They intimidate him and try to get him to give up on his dream of being a Kung Fu master, to leave the Jade Palace. They are gatekeeping Kung Fu, just like Oogway did with characters like Dao Dai. What's more, they continue Oogway's questionable tactics on how to deal with students that they deem to be headed down a dark path. In that episode introducing Fong Wong, the owl who was the most powerful of the Furious Five, the rest of the characters start treating Po strangely. They worry that he's grown too powerful and will quote-unquote turn evil, just like Fong Wong did. And you know how Oogway made that perfectly sized owl-shaped cage for Fong Wong? Well, the Furious Five were doing the exact same thing for Po, creating a panda-shaped prison for him should he turn evil instead of, communicating with him. But the biggest tragedy here, after experiencing all of this himself, even Po isn't free from the horrible influence of Oogway and his teachings. In the Legends of Awesomeness, Po meets Tai Lung's nephew Peng, who is incredibly talented at Kung Fu. Po and Shifu decide that he should train at the Jade Palace, but after Po sees the extent of Peng's skill, he gets jealous, to the point that he tells Peng that he must leave. He lies to Peng, explaining that he's
Not making that.
Now, where have I heard that story before? Po did exactly the same thing to Peng that Oogway did to Tai Lung, telling a student that they weren't good enough without communicating, and the results turned violent. And it doesn't stop there, either. In another episode, three pigs ask Po to teach them some secret kung fu moves, but Po turns them down and smugly says,
That's why they're called secret moves. They're secret.
As a result, the pigs kidnap Shifu and force him to teach them kung fu instead, all to get revenge on Po. Just like Oogway and Shifu before him, Po is gatekeeping kung fu here and making an enemy out of someone he doesn't need to. And then later, in the series Paws of Destiny, 4 young pandas want to learn kung fu, but Po initially refuses to teach them because...
You haven't seen these kids. They're hopeless.
Po, buddy, come here. Do you remember where you started? And also keep in mind that this series is set after Kung Fu Panda 3, which is all about learning that anyone can be a good fighter as long as they embrace what they're good at. Ironic, since Po seems to be more like Oogway than his own person here. The apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. Or I guess it would be a peach in this case. The point is, Po hasn't learned the ways of peace from Master Oogway or Shifu or the Furious Five. He's learned to be selfish, arrogant, and ensure that he's better than everyone else. At every turn, from his lies about the Dragon Warrior to his poor and cryptic style of teaching to even how his students carry on his legacy, Master Oogway did more harm than good for the world of Kung Fu Panda. And honestly, his teachings don't even live up to the core theming of the franchise. In a series all about embracing the best parts of yourself, Oogway is all too eager to find the worst traits in others, the darkness in their hearts, throwing them away when they don't meet his expectations. And what's more, Oogway's gatekeeping goes directly against the meaning of Kung Fu itself. Though we associate Kung Fu mostly with martial arts, that isn't what it's limited to. In China, the term Kung Fu refers to anything that requires patience, discipline, and hard work. Yes, Oogway is supportive of characters like Po and Shifu, encouraging them to embrace what they're good at. But why doesn't he do that for the others? Why doesn't he celebrate the powerful drive of Tai Lung, the mechanical genius of Dao Dai, the ambition of Fong Wong? Those aren't bad traits. With the right guiding hand, the right mentor, they can become powerful tools in making the world a better place. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. And hey, if you want more Kung Fu Panda right now, Matt did a theory all about how Po is actually the best choice for the dragon.
The island of Madagascar, known for being home to the world's most unique flora and fauna, playful lemurs, colorful chameleons, stunning orchids. It's here that 5 castaway species from the Central Park Zoo will try to make a home. Along the way, they'll make alliances, compete against dangerous foes, and try to overcome the elements of this beautiful but untamed land. 7 movies, 5 animals, 1 survivor. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that likes to move it. If by move you mean destroy, and it you mean the simple nostalgic memories that you once had of all the movies that you watched as a child. Now, maybe you think that makes me a bit of a buzzkill, but just can't help thinking about the implications of whimsical worlds created by animated movies. I suppose a quote-unquote normal person would watch a movie like The Rescuers and think, oh, that's cute. Little adventure story starring 2 talking mice. But is it really my fault if I watch that same movie and think to myself, the bottle at the beginning of the movie is taken to a mouse version of the United Nations. Now, the real United Nations was formed after World War II, so does that mean that this mouse society also had itself a World War II? Does that mean that there was a first World War between mice, followed by an ill-conceived mouse League of Nations that collapsed in the face of rising mouse nationalism? Look, if you're gonna create a fantastical world, somebody is gonna have to ask the tough questions about how it works, and that somebody is inevitably gonna be me. And so for today's topic, we'll be looking at what I believe to be one of the more underrated animated franchises of the 21st century, Madagascar. Not only are these movies lighthearted and fun, they also feature some really impressive voice talent. No other franchise is really gonna give you Zoolander, Borat, Walter White, and Jack Donaghy all in the same place. They're fun, they're colorful, the writing is fine most of the time.
Grand Central Station. It's grand and central.
What, was that a joke? It seemed like it was setting up for a joke.
Did that just say Grand Central Station or my aunt's constipation?
Yeah, okay, so not all the jokes are gonna land here, but these movies are easy to watch and they distract my toddler long enough for me to go to the bathroom in peace, so what's not to love? But, and you know that when I start singing the praises of the movie franchise, there's gonna be some sort of but involved. I just can't help but wonder how well our beloved talking animal friends are actually gonna fare on the island of Madagascar. If you need a reminder, in the first movie, Alex the lion, Marty the zebra, Melman the giraffe, Gloria the hippo, and a whole host of other animals are being relocated from their home in the Central Park Zoo to a wildlife preserve over in Kenya. Due to the hijinks of the penguins on board, the animal crates fall off the side of a ship and wash ashore on the coast of, you're never gonna guess it, Madagascar. Whoo boy, didn't see that one coming. And then they learn a lot of valuable lessons about friendship, and there are some dance breaks, and we leave the door wide open for a subsequent series of sequels, all in under 90 minutes. 4 stars. It's no Wall-E, but it's definitely not Minions, so we're in the clear. Would watch again, which is good considering my son is gonna wanna watch it 300 more times before the next month. But of course, the crazy part of my brain can't help but ask the question, how are these animals really gonna fare on the island of Madagascar? None of their species actually live there in the wild, and these particular animals have grown up in a zoo, with regular meals being delivered to them and no threat of predators around. Unless, of course, you count that one old lady that they met in Grand Central Station. So today we're playing a high-stakes version of Survivor Madagascar, where the losers leave the island in a body bag. Who's gonna live? Who's gonna die? Who lives to tell your spin-off? Keep your giant lemur eyes peeled for all those pesky fossa, because today we're escaping to Africa. Because Madagascar is part of the continent of Africa. Just go with it. To start off with, let's go with our early favorite, Alex the lion. He's strong, he's fast, he dances for people at the zoo, and to be sure, there are certain things about Madagascar's landscape that Alex is going to be finding pretty appealing. For one, the apex predator on Madagascar is, as we see in the movie, the fossa. So unlike in mainland Africa, where Alex would have to compete with leopards and cheetahs and hyenas for his kills, on Madagascar, his biggest competition weighs about 20 pounds, less than 1/10 of his regular size. Should be a pretty easy win for him to be king of the island, right? Well, you see, Alex is far from a normal lion. We learn from the beginning of the sequel, Madagascar Escape to Africa, that as a cub, Alex was much less interested in learning how to fight from his father than he is in dancing around, before he's eventually captured by poachers and ends up in the Central Park Zoo. While his life in that zoo certainly gives him opportunities to dance around, the fact that he's lived most of his life there is gonna create some problems when he's on his own out in the wild. According to Katie Moore from the International Fund for Animal Welfare, quote, in a lot of cases, it is still impossible to release captive animals into the wild, especially if the animals have been traumatized or were very young when captured. Since lions typically live with their mothers until they're about 2 or 3 years old, those early years are filled with lifelong lessons that Alex never got. Beyond the issues of avoiding dangerous situations and learning the social lessons of living in a lion pride, which itself is a moot point since there's no other wild lions in Madagascar, Alex's biggest problem is the one that we're gonna see in the movie, food. A major point of the first Madagascar movie is how Alex is so used to being fed steak by zookeepers that he doesn't really know what to do when the gang first arrives on the island, leading to an awkward desire to eat his best friend Marty the zebra.
He's going savage.
Where have I heard that phrase before?
I believe he and Miss Jaguar, they went savage, sir.
Animals don't go savage.
Disney ripping off other companies' story concepts? no. But in real life, Alex probably would have had a hard time even hunting Marty. A group called ALERT, the African Lion and Environmental Research Trust, has developed a procedure for releasing previously captive lions out into the wild. And one of the most important steps is putting the lions in an enclosed space with prey to give them hunting practice, because without that, they're not naturally good at hunting for their own survival. ALERT also usually does this with cubs instead of the previously captured lions, because the ones who grew up in captivity are already considered to be largely a lost cause. In the movie, the food problem gets solved when other animals feed Alex some sushi, but again, as a mature lion, Alex would never be able to support himself fishing. And even more importantly, as a big cat, Alex definitely wouldn't be equipped to go into the water and hunt fish. I mean, you even see him avoiding the water when they first land on the island. So it is without judgment that I say that our friend Alex the lion is in trouble with no survival skills and no other lions to show him how to survive. Alex, the tribe has spoken, and it says that you're gonna starve to death in Madagascar. Now, yes, I recognize that that's a pretty dark way to start the episode, but that's the circle of life, friends. Ever watched Planet Earth? No horror movie I've ever seen has scarred me as badly as seeing a giant centipede catch a bat out of midair and eat it. The point is, nature is metal, y'all. It doesn't take any prisoners. And it's not all bad news. I mean, Marty the zebra doesn't have to learn how to hunt his prey, mainly because it's rooted in the ground and can't run away. He, as a zebra, eats plants, and that's not that hard to come by. And while the movie makes it seem like Marty might make for a nice fossa feast, it's actually unlikely that they try to eat him in real life, given that they almost always hunt alone, and Marty outweighs them by approximately 800 pounds. So Marty should be fine on Madagascar, right? Plenty of food, no predators. Well, one of the other major issues with animals raised in captivity is that they become habituated to humans and don't fear them after they get re-released into the wild. And you see, that's gonna be especially dangerous for Marty in Madagascar. For Marty, humans have represented safety and food for his whole life, but once he lands in Madagascar, it's very likely that any humans he encounters will be much more dangerous to him. You see, zebras are very frequently hunted in their native habitat, sometimes for meat, but much more often for their distinctive striped skin. And unfortunately, poaching is just a huge problem in Madagascar. Historically, the poachers there hunt for lemurs, so King Julian will probably want to move it if he sees any humans coming. But it's likely that a non-native zebra pelt would be a big win for the local poachers. Sorry, Marty, the tribe has spoken. Next up is Melman the giraffe. Again, Melman is probably too big to be prey for any of the animals that exist on the island. Also, Madagascar is home to many of the trees that giraffes like to eat from the most. There's even an initiative underway to plant 60 million new trees on Madagascar, many of which are acacia trees, which just so happens to be a giraffe's favorite food. Then again, we've also seen Melman eat a urinal cake, so being picky about food might not have been that much of a problem anyway.
That room has some nifty little sinks you can wash up in, and look, free mint.
But here is the problem for Melman. We know from Madagascar Escape to Africa that Melman is a bit of a hypochondriac.
Okay, you guys really need a doctor.
And honestly, as a giraffe, he has every right to be. Giraffes are especially susceptible to parasites, skin conditions, and a whole variety of other diseases. Oddly, one disease that giraffes are known to get is tuberculosis. And tuberculosis is a huge problem in Madagascar. The International Association for Medical Assistance to Travelers specifically warns that TB is highly endemic to Madagascar and a major health problem in the country. Now, TB isn't always fatal, but with Melman living on his own, he isn't going to be receiving a whole heck of a lot of treatment beyond sitting in his own die hole. And if the TB doesn't get Melman, there's a pretty decent chance that he'll get himself some trypanosomosis, a disease caused by protozoan parasites and known to infect both giraffes and a wide variety of species on Madagascar. Melman, the tribe has spoken, and it says you should have worn a mask and gotten your shots. Okay, but what about the penguins, huh? If they can hijack the boat that was taking all the animals to Africa in the first place, then surely they should be able to manage surviving in Madagascar, right? Well, canonically speaking, the penguins are Adelie penguins, one of the few species of penguins that actually lives in Antarctica. Now, you might not believe this, but the climates of Antarctica and a subtropical island off the coast of Africa are going to be just a wee bit different. In coastal regions like the one where our little feathered friends land, temperatures get up to around 32 degrees Celsius, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Adelie penguins have to remain constantly in cold temperatures, otherwise they faint like little Pokemon. Now, while I wasn't able to find exact data on what kind of temperatures cause Adelie penguins to faint permanently, it's reasonable to assume that their temperature tolerance is going to be similar to that of the emperor penguin, the only other species to live its entire life on Antarctica. Emperor penguins start to eat snow in order to regulate their body temperatures when they overheat, and the high end of temperatures that they can withstand is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, a good 33% plus cooler than the temperatures that they'll be experiencing on Madagascar. Sorry penguins, you can't MacGyver your way out of heat stroke. The tribe has spoken. Now at this point you're probably thinking to yourself, man, I should probably subscribe to this channel, and you know what I'm thinking? Man, that is a really good idea. Help us get that much closer to 10 million subscribers on Film Theory, I would appreciate it. But after you click the red button below this video as well as rung the bell, I'm sure your next thought is disappointment. You clicked on this video because you like the Madagascar movies, so you know, you've been having a grand old time listening to me list off the gruesome, horrific deaths awaiting these charming, innocent characters. And let me just say this, dear viewer, I have good news, and it comes in the form of Gloria the hippo. Unlike Alex, Gloria doesn't need to learn the finer points of hunting from other hippopotami since her food doesn't move. Hippos eat plants. The climate in Madagascar is fine for her as many hippos are native to sub-Saharan African regions with similar, even a bit warmer climates. Hippos are susceptible to a few diseases, most notably anthrax, but no confirmed cases of anthrax have been found on Madagascar in recent history. Sadly, hippos are sometimes targets of poachers, usually for their teeth, but Gloria has a better shot against poachers than Marty for sure. For one, she has the option of escaping underwater if she needs to, and also hippos routinely kill humans, so she's got herself better ability to defend herself than her zebra buddy. Now, maybe you think that I'm leading you astray to pull the rug out from under you, that I'm setting up all the pieces to show her survival only to cruelly rip her life away in the most brutal fashion in the final sentences of this video. But no, not this time actually. Gloria actually has a great shot of surviving. We have real-world evidence that a hippopotamus raised in captivity could in fact be released into an environment that it's not native to and not only survive, but thrive. And it comes from the world's most notorious drug dealer. No, not him. This guy, Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar was a notorious Colombian drug lord, famous for a variety of things. Perhaps the most wholesome of which was that he had himself a private zoo. When he was killed in 1993, his 4 pet hippos were released into the wilds of Colombia. And wouldn't you know it, there aren't 4 hippos there anymore. There are now as many as 100 in Colombia's Magdalena River. They adapted to the environment, the vegetation, the whole ecosystem of an entirely different continent than the one that they came from. So when Gloria finds herself on Madagascar, she, unlike her comrades, is well equipped to stay for the long haul. After a while, she might just take the crown away from King Julian. And if that means I don't have to see him dance anymore, I am all for it. See, I told you this episode would have a happy ending. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cuts.
Here, Matt Pat?
Oh, hey Mickey. I'm just curling up with a warm cup of cocoa, reading this listicle about famous products that are actually ripoffs. These keep getting suggested to me ever since I made that food theory episode about how Oreos are actually Hydrox cookies. Hey, what's this one? This article says that Finding Nemo was actually plagiarized?
Does it now?
Well, apparently in 2002 there was a French children's book about a little clownfish whose father is killed and through an epic journey ends up reuniting with his mother.
Well, clearly you must be forgetting an important detail, Matt Pat. Nemo is all about a dying mother and the boy's quest to reunite with his father. Clearly different, haha.
Nikki, come on.
Look at the colors, Matt Pat. Nemo is clearly a different color.
They're both orange.
Are they, Matt Pat? Are is obviously slightly more red than this Shark Tale reject.
But apparently there's other stuff in here too.
Are you actually going to believe the clickbait, Matt Pat?
No, I'm gonna do the research. I'm not gonna sleep until I know the truth about this one, Mickey, no matter what it takes.
Well, fair warning, Matt Pat. You might not like what you find at the end of that journey.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where if I was a fish, I'd be a bottom feeder. Speaking of bottom feeders, at least I'm not a lawyer. Haha! That segue was so seamless you didn't even see it. Wow, now that we're talking about lawyers, you know who gets sued a lot? Disney. In all seriousness, the whole House of Mouse has been a frequent target for lawsuits over the years for reasons that have less to do with their guilt or innocence and with a simple law of economics. They's where the money's at. People aim their lawsuits at Disney for the same reason that bank robbers go after banks. Things go well, could be an easy payday. Of course, most attempts to sue Disney are also foiled for the same reason that most bank robbery attempts don't pan out. They can afford better security. Let's just say that when you're a $300 billion company with lots of lawyers and governmental connections, you have a lot of ways that you can protect yourself. So it makes it really unclear when Disney is actually doing something wrong versus when a lawsuit is just another shameless cash grab. Case in point, in 2003, our dear friend Mickey was actually a target of a lawsuit by a French children's author who claimed that Disney plagiarized the idea for his book, an idea that would eventually lead to the production of Finding Nemo. You know, the first Pixar film to win an Academy Award, one of the American Film Institute's 10 best animated films of all time, the movie that is the best-selling DVD in history, at the time the single highest grossing G-rated movie with a total box office just shy of $900 million. You know, saying that movie was stolen is kind of a big deal. Also, as a quick side note here, I should mention that in 2003, Disney didn't own Pixar yet, but it was the distribution company for the movie, so they were involved in the lawsuit too. Just a lot easier to point to the rodent-themed mascot that serves as the face of corporate global domination instead of, you know, a silent jumping desk lamp. The story of the children's book author goes like this. In 1995, Franck Lecalves claims to have come up with an idea for an animated film about clownfish. A simple boy's father dies, boy must go on an epic journey to reunite with his surviving mother story. As a guy in his mid-20s at the time, he was an aspiring filmmaker, and he claims that he pitched his idea to French production companies and animation studios, but no one bit. Get it? No one bit? Anyway, his idea lay untouched for half a decade until, in the year 2000, he finally decided to take his animated film concept and turn it into a children's book, Perrault le Poison Clown. Oh god, poison clowns! Oh, sorry, I misread that. It's Perrault le Poisson Clown. Perrault the clownfish. It's been a few years since I took French. For a minute there, I thought I had to be even more scared of clowns than I already am. Nope, the only thing I have to be scared of in this story are these lumpy clownfish illustrations that'll fuel my nightmares. Ugh. Because no one believed in his story, Lecalves self-published the book. Reportedly, he paid $71,000 to print 2,000 copies, and miraculously, he managed to sell them all to bookstores, though it's unlikely that he actually turned a profit. At $70,000 for 2,000 books, he was probably spending about $35 for each one, and considering that retail bookstores tend to charge a margin of around 40%, the only way that he would have made any money back is if the bookstores were charging over $58 a copy, which I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say was not the case. No children's book is worth that, especially when the cover looks like this. In other words, he was probably eating a massive loss on each copy sold, but hey, who am I to dissuade a man from pursuing his dream of being a children's book author with observations about the harsh realities of the economics of book publishing? Anyway, in 2002, Lecalves finally got his idea out into the world, both by self-publishing a children's book and by registering his screenplay with the French Society of Authors, apparently unwilling to give up with his movie-making aspirations. At last, he was able to tell the story of a young clownfish who, after tragically losing one of his parents to an underwater predator, was able to reunite with his remaining parent after a marine journey. Life was good. So imagine how crushing it would be when the following year Disney and Pixar releases Finding Nemo, which shatters box office records and touts what seems to be a pretty suspiciously similar premise. For one thing, it's gotta be frustrating to pitch an idea to film production companies and get rejected, only for a movie with the same premise to become literally the highest grossing animated film of all time 8 years later. You know, peek behind the scenes, actually feel a bit of the sting. Actually pitched an idea that was roughly the video games that made us to Netflix, only for them to reject it and then see them do the exact same concept a few years later with the series High Score.
I don't know. 5 of my friends got Netflixes. It's a very achievable goal.
Well, you don't have to rub it in, Summer. But as an added kick in the badly CGI'd gills, French bookstores started taking his book off the shelves because they thought that his 2002 children's book was ripping off the idea from the 2003 Disney film. In an interview with NBC News Today, LeCelvez explained, quote, "What's really upsetting is that quite a few bookstores won't sell my book because they think that I have plagiarized Nemo." This was the last straw. LeCelvez decided that if anyone was going to be throwing around accusations of plagiarism, it was going to be him, which led to the lawsuit in December 2003 where he claimed that Disney was the one who copied his idea, demanding that Disney give him a share of profits from all Finding Nemo merchandise sold in France. Given that Finding Nemo sold over 40 million copies of the DVD during its first 3 years on store shelves, with tons more made in the sale of toys, coloring books, and other merch, that would put a lot of money at stake, even if it was just limited to France. So that sets up our multi-million-dollar question for the day. Did Disney Pixar actually steal the idea for Finding Nemo? Who is right in this David versus Goliath story? Is this a simple case of the greedy corporation stepping on the little guy, or is something else at play here? That, my friends, is what I aim to look at today. First, we have to answer the interesting legal question of can you actually sue someone for copying your idea? The answer is, it depends on the idea. There's, of course, the idea of intellectual property, something that Disney, of all corporations, knows a lot about, considering how hard they've worked to keep their original characters out of the public domain, going so far as to spend millions of dollars each year lobbying Congress so that the copyright laws mysteriously change every time a certain cartoon mouse from 1928 gets old enough that he's at risk of entering the public domain. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, look up the most recent of these, the Copyright Term Extension Act of 1998, also known as the Sonny Bono Act, or its unofficial name, the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. As you're reading about this one, I direct your attention to the fact that they were trying to get the copyrights to last forever, and when that was deemed unconstitutional, they proposed forever minus 1 day. Can't make this stuff up. Let's just say that they want to make very sure that they're the only ones using that talking mouse. So mark your calendars for January 1st, 2024, which is currently when the expiration of the copyright for Mickey's first movie, Steamboat Willie, and along with it, Disney's claim to that version of Mickey Mouse, expires. It's also worth noting that Superman and Batman are set to come due a few years later in 2031. But here's the thing, just because they own a specific cartoon mouse doesn't mean that they own the idea of talking cartoon mice in general. Disney's copyright covers Mickey, sure, but that doesn't mean that they can go after Warner Brothers for Pinky and the Brain or Speedy Gonzales. They own a copyright on a specific character. On the other hand, if you were to create a walking, talking mouse with red shorts, large yellow shoes, white gloves, and large circular ears, then you might come across a problem. Unless you are using it for parody purposes, which falls under fair use, which is what I did in the opening gag, so please don't sue us, Disney. The point is that when talking about copyright, if LeCelvez wants to claim that Disney's Finding Nemo infringes on his, he needs to prove substantial similarity. This is the legal standard in the US, and while EU countries like France sometimes use slightly different language like striking similarity, the basic principles tend to boil down to the same 3 requirements. First, you need to own a valid copyright. Second, you need to show that the person you're suing actually copied your work. And third, you need to prove misappropriation, meaning that the thing that was copied was substantial, either by copying a lot of your idea or by copying the core or heart of the work. The first item on the checklist, that you have a valid copyright, kind of a no-duh. LeCelvez not only owns the copyright on his children's book, but he also took the step of registering the copyright for the screenplay version of his story. The last point, misappropriation, is something that would also likely fall in his favor. After all, the central story of Perrault le Poisson Clown is about a kid clownfish who needs to reunite with his one surviving parent after his other parent is killed by a marine predator. That isn't some random insignificant detail, it is the heart of both these stories. So that is 2 major items checked, but the part that gets a little bit harder to prove is that second bullet point, that Disney outright copied his idea. Now, as you can imagine, it's pretty difficult to prove that someone just copied your work, which is why courts often rely on the striking similarity test. If you can show that the quote-unquote copied version is so similar to the original that there's no way it could have come about by sheer coincidence, then you've met the standard. So are the similarities between Finding Nemo and Perrault le Poisson Clown close enough to meet the striking similarity requirement? Well, here's what LeCelvez's copyright lawyer had to say about the uncanny resemblance between the 2 characters. First, Nemo, like Perrault, is a clownfish with orange and white stripes who lives in a sea anemone. Now, that right there might sound like 3 points of similarity, but the reality is that all clownfish look like this. If you are going to create a story about a clownfish, then it naturally follows that he would look orange with white stripes. Likewise, clownfish just live in sea anemones. That is a fact. Pointing to these similarities as evidence of copying is like pointing to two zebra characters and claiming that one must be copied from the other because they both have black and white stripes and live in the savannah. They also claim that there were, quote, the same supporting characters in the film, such as a surgeon fish and cleaner shrimp, and gentle fish folk who help the little troubled hero. Now, if you're wondering about that surgeon fish he mentions, no, he's not referring to a fish doctor working on a high pay scale. I'm sorry, I have a problem. No, they're referring to a family of fishes known in the scientific community by the name Acanthuridae, meaning tail spine. Dory, being a blue tang, is part of this family of fish, and one of Pierrot's friends is also part of that same fish family. However, pointing to two fishes being in the same taxonomic family as evidence of copying in scientific terms is like saying that Mordecai from Cartoon Network's regular show must be a ripoff of the crows from Dumbo because blue jays and crows are part of the same bird family. If that sounds like a dumb stretch, you're right, it is, which is why I'm writing it down as a future theory idea. But seriously, it's kind of flimsy evidence, right? Likewise, the cleaner shrimp that they mention is just a common underwater animal. As for those gentle fish folk who help the little troubled hero, yeah, it's not gonna fly. Clearly, Disney must have copied my idea because my main character, who is a fish, meets other fish characters who help him on his journey. Obviously, though, the strongest point of comparison is with the beginning of the story. A clownfish parent dies, leading to a perilous journey where a kid reunites with his parent. That's hard to argue against as a direct connection, right? You'd be surprised. Consider this. Disney has a long history with killing off its animal parents, be it Bambi in 1942, The Fox and the Hound, Brother Bear, Lion King. They practically invented the trope. So that alone is going to be pretty hard to defend, but making matters worse is the premise of both of these stories. Well, sure, they look similar on paper, they don't match up when you dive deeper. In Perrault, the young little clownfish is the one who has to go away to find his parents, while in Finding Nemo, it's the dad Marlin who goes on the grand adventure. And also, it's worth mentioning that the way both journeys play out is just vastly different. But Le Calvez's case gets even harder to defend when you consider the timeline of events. At first glance, it seems like his book, released in 2002, came before the movie, released in 2003. So clearly the one that came second must be the copy, right? But you as well as I know that animated movies take a long time to make. Finding Nemo was in pre-production way back in 1997. Even Le Calvez's copyright lawyer admitted that the film was finished by the time the book came out. In short, the only real piece of evidence that Le Calvez has to stand on is his own claim that in 1995 he pitched French animation studios about an idea for a movie about a lost clownfish. And personal anecdotes don't really hold up in court. And if that's Le Calvez's argument, that someone heard him talking about his idea in the 1990s and decided to make Finding Nemo based on that, then it makes no sense for him to talk about the visual similarities, since he didn't hire an illustrator for his children's book until years after he was already done pitching the idea. And surprisingly, the French court actually ruled that there were significant enough visual differences between the two characters. To quote a translation from the original French, Perrault appears longer and cylindrical, Nemo is in a range of red, and Perrault in ranges of orange. One has scales, the other not. If the two characters are smiling, Nemo shows teeth and the smile is close to that of a human, while Perrault's mouth, toothless, resumes the smile attributed to certain representations of dolphins. One also looks like they put his model through a blender, but you know, that's not my place to judge. So, is that the end of our story? Little guy loses because of the big corporation steamrolling over him? I mean, that's where most of the clickbait articles stop the story, so it must end there, right? No, my friends, the ruling of the French court found that there was something shady going on, and Disney wasn't the villain. See, everything that I've just laid out is stuff that the French court figured Le Calvez and his lawyer already knew, or at least should have known. The lawyer would have known that Disney would win the case. Le Calvez would have known that a movie couldn't have copied the look of his main character from a book published less than a year earlier. That's not me speculating, that is basically the legal conclusion of the French court, which ruled that Le Calvez knew about the existence of Finding Nemo when his own clownfish protagonist was brought to life by an illustrator. After all, Finding Nemo didn't hit theaters until 2003, sure, but previews of Finding Nemo were appearing on home video copies of Disney movies back in 2002. In fact, the French court's ruling went as far to say, quoting from the BBC, Nemo had existed before Perrault, and that Le Calvez knew of the Disney character when he created his. In short, this does wind up being a story about someone copying someone else's idea for a profit, but Disney wasn't the one doing the copying. Redcliff tried to rip off Disney. He not only ended up losing his case, he was forced to pay a total of 61,000 euros, or about $100,000 in damages to reimburse Disney for the legal fees from his frivolous lawsuit. And here's the kicker, friends, to also pay for the cost of advertising the ruling, just to make sure that everyone knew that Disney was innocent in all of this. Redcliff, I'll accept my paycheck now, please. Oh, I guess I'm not a part of that. In fact, if you start looking at the case from the standpoint of him being guilty from the start, like maybe this was a setup to be some kind of cash grab hoping to nab an easy payday from Disney because they would want to settle out of court and not make headlines, suddenly a lot of the weird details I told you about earlier start to make sense. Like the fact that he paid $71,000 to publish 2,000 copies of a book that would have been impossible to turn a profit on. Or the fact that he waited until 2002 to register his screenplay despite supposedly trying to get his idea made into a film back in 1995. These moves make a lot more sense if you assume that he was already in the process of laying the groundwork for a lawsuit against Disney. And again, that's not me, that was the conclusion of the French legal authorities. I gotta admit, it feels a little bit weird to come down on Disney's side for this episode. After all, my natural inclination is usually to side with the little guy, not the $300 billion mega corporation. But if there's one thing that we're all about here on Film Theory, it's that you shouldn't always blindly trust your first assumptions. Just because someone looks like the scrappy underdog in a David versus Goliath story, it doesn't automatically mean that they're the good guy. And let's face it, these channels are always telling you that the villains might actually be the ones who were right all along, and today is honestly no exception. I cannot imagine anyone better to play the role of the villain, who may have just actually been right in this case, than Disney. But hey, that's just a theory, a film theory. And cuts. And hey, if you like this Finding Nemo theory, make sure you check out our two-parter where we expose Dory's secrets. We have solid evidence to suggest that she might just be faking her memory problems the entire time. Just keep subscribing so that... JFK's assassination, the moon landing, Area 51. None of these conspiracies have anything on. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that swears it won't subject you to a bunch of fish puns in this episode. I mean, were I to do that, it would be a turtle disaster. Oh, sorry, I didn't do that on purpose. Ooh, I just need to clam down. I can't keep floundering. Someone call a sturgeon. Okay, no more. It's out of my system. No more fish puns ever. I mean, it's not like anyone's ever gonna want a film theory on Shark Tale anyway. Finding Nemo. Everybody loves Finding Nemo. And why shouldn't they? It's got everything you could want in an animated children's film that happens to be about neglected sons, kidnapping, imprisonment, mental illness, and the dangers of the outside world.
That's the one thing we have to remember about the ocean.
It's not safe.
That's my boy.
But in all seriousness, that's the beauty of Pixar. Sure, Finding Nemo has cute animated fish talking and making jokes, but beneath the surface, there's some serious adult themes. And what if I were to tell you that there's a Pixar secret so hidden, so subversive, and so shocking that no one has yet to pick up on it? Would you believe me? Let's take it a step further. What if I were to tell you that one fish, Dory, has been lying to us the whole time?
Huh?
Oh, I am on to you, Ellen DeGeneres. Finding Dory? More like exposing Dory. The truth is coming out. Throughout Finding Nemo, small fish, against all odds, outsmart bigger predators. Nemo is constantly told that he simply isn't strong enough to swim in the ocean.
You know you can't swim well.
Yet in the end, it's Nemo's ability to swim that saves him from being caught by the humans. Marlin, a small clownfish no one takes seriously, becomes a legend amongst aquatic life after surviving encounters with sharks, jellyfish, and whales. It's such an important theme to this movie that it even appears in the closing credits. The tiniest, most nervous fish of them all, Blenny, turns the tables on the sharp-fanged anglerfish, devouring him in one swift bite. The film boils down to one central idea: don't judge people or or in this case, fish, on appearance alone. And if there's one fish that stands out from the pack, the most vulnerable of all, it's Dory. At first glance, it's easy to dismiss her. She suffers from short-term memory loss, and as such, she has no concept of where she is at any given point in time. She just wanders around haphazardly from place to place, sort of like the animated fish version of Mr. Bean.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
Dory is constantly making silly and dangerous decisions, whether it's approaching sharks for directions, pretending to know whale talk by slowing down her speech, or bouncing up and down on a jellyfish like a trampoline. Dory even thinks that naval mines are
balloons. Look, it is a party.
Who would ever take this fish seriously? Yet the results tell a completely different story. If you look just at what Dory accomplishes, she's actually the most competent and knowledgeable fish in the film. Dory successfully barters with the sharks, controlling them via a vegetarian support group. She may not know what naval mines are, but she sure knows how to shoot a missile out of a downed submarine. She's the only fish that can read English, and the only fish that speaks whale. Because, yeah, slowing down her speech was actually the correct way to do it. She's the fish that knows to duck when she sees a seagull, and most importantly of all, the fish that actually finds Nemo and reunites him with his father. So how do you reconcile Dory's naive personality with her shrewd resume? The answer lies far in the past. Ancient Rome, in fact. Now hear me out. That sounds weird, but hear me out. Claudius was the Roman emperor from 41 to 54 AD. As a child, he was afflicted with a limp and slight deafness. As such, he was ostracized by his wealthy family and considered a disgrace to the name. Basically, he was Tyrion Lannister. These handicaps, though, saved Claudius during the tumultuous rule of Tiberius and Caligula, who killed all noblemen and potential heirs to the throne. Claudius, though, was spared because he wasn't perceived as a threat. And despite Claudius's physical limitations, he was an expert political thinker, just like Tyrion Lannister. After Caligula was assassinated, Claudius became the emperor, and under his rule, Rome returned to the prosperity of Augustus' reign. Aqueducts, new roads, canals, they were all built, and the empire was once again connected. So what does any of this have to do with a fictional animated fish? Well, just like Claudius, Dory is using a physical limitation to ward off potential threats. Except unlike Claudius, she actually doesn't have those physical limitations. You heard me right. I'm saying right here and right now, Dory doesn't suffer from short-term memory loss. In the entirety of Finding Nemo, she's faking it. Don't let that wide-eyed, freckled face fool you. By applying our knowledge of the normal symptoms for short-term memory loss to Dory, we can find cracks in her so-called story. It's time that Dory flop like a fish. There are actually two main forms of amnesia.